My straight soccer captain slept beside me. Then he started getting jealous gay love story. If this story speaks to your heart, stay with me till the end. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and press the bell icon so these stories can keep finding the people who need them. By the time the rain started coming sideways, I had already accepted that no one was going to remember my duffel bag under the bus. It was wedged behind 2 coolers, a crate of wet practice jerseys, and the backup keeper's cleats, which smelled like they'd been dug out of a swamp. I told myself I'd grab it last, because that was what I always did. Last off the bus, last into the locker room, last name called unless someone needed tape, water, or a quiet guy to run extra cones after practice. Reliable, coach always said, like it was a compliment and not a place to stand where no one had to look too closely. We'd lost the away game by 1 goal, which meant the whole bus carried that heavy, sour silence athletes pretend is focus. Rain hit the windows hard enough to blur the parking lot lights into long yellow smears. Most of the guys had headphones on. Tyler was asleep with his mouth open. Our assistant coach muttered into his phone near the front, trying to convince someone from campus that yes, the roads were bad, and no, we weren't being dramatic. I sat halfway back with my knees pressed against the seat in front of me, one sleeve still damp from loading equipment. Across the aisle, 3 rows ahead, Mason Reed leaned his head against the window like the storm was something he could outlast by willpower alone. Even tired, he looked like the kind of person a camera found without trying. Dark hair flattened from rain, captain's band still wrapped around his wrist. A bruise was blooming along his jaw from a collision in the second half, but somehow it made him look more untouchable, not less. The whole team orbited around Mason. Coaches trusted him. Freshmen copied him. Girls from other schools waited near the fences after games just to say his name. I'd spent almost a year teaching myself not to stare. It helped that Mason was straight in the uncomplicated way people believed without asking. He talked about girls when the other guys did, laughed at the right jokes, brought dates to team events, and carried himself with the easy certainty of someone who'd never had to rehearse where his hands went in public. I knew better than to make a story out of small kindnesses. Mason saving me a seat on the bus didn't mean anything. Mason remembering how I took my coffee didn't mean anything. Mason called out, "Vale, you good?" After a hard tackle didn't mean anything except that he was a good captain. Still, when he turned in his seat and looked back at me, my body reacted before my brain could stop it. "You're shivering," he said. The guys between us were too tired to care. I looked down as if my own hands had betrayed me. They were tucked under my arms, fingers stiff and pale from the cold that had settled into my wet sleeves. "I'm fine," I said. Came out automatic, the same way it always did. Mason's eyes narrowed, not angry, exactly, but focused. Sometimes he looked at me like he saw the places I'd carefully covered up. "You always say that." I tried to smile. "Because I'm consistent. Because you're stubborn. Also consistent." One corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile. Then the bus lurched hard enough that someone cursed near the back. The tires hissed over flooded pavement. The coach lifted a hand and told everyone to settle down, but his voice had lost its usual bite. A minute later the bus slowed, then stopped completely, under a stretch of highway where the only light came from a flickering gas station sign and the white flash of lightning behind the trees. For a while nobody said much. Rain hammered the roof. The driver stepped outside with his jacket over his head, came back soaked, and spoke quietly to Coach. Whatever he said made Coach pinch the bridge of his nose. That was when I knew the night was about to become everyone's problem, which meant it would probably become mine first. "All right, listen up," Coach called. "Road closure ahead and we've got engine trouble. There's a motel across the lot. We're getting rooms for the night and heading back in the morning." The bus woke in pieces, groans, jokes, someone asking if the motel had cable, someone else asking if food delivery worked in a storm. I stood before most of them did because the equipment still had to come off. My shoes squelched when I stepped into the aisle. Mason was already up too, talking with Coach, calm and serious, the version of him everyone trusted. He looked over Coach's shoulder and found me reaching for the crate of jerseys. "Leave that," he said. "I've got it. Ethan. Not Vale, not Man, not Hay. My first name, low enough to cut through the noise without needing volume." I froze with one hand on the crate. It was ridiculous how quickly my attention obeyed him. It'll take 2 minutes. And you're shaking hard enough to drop it. I'm not. Mason stepped closer, close enough that I could see rain caught in his lashes. You are. Behind him, Tyler bumped my shoulder as he squeezed past. Vale's always doing extra credit. Let him marry the equipment cart. Couple guys laughed. It wasn't cruel, not exactly. They liked me well enough. They trusted me with their shin guards and spare socks. I was useful, which had always seemed safer than being wanted. Useful people got kept around. I gave Tyler a lazy salute. The cart treats me better than most people. More laughter, easy and disposable. I bent again for the crate, but Mason's hand closed around the handle before mine could grip it. I said, leave it. The laughter thinned, not because Mason had raised his voice. He hadn't. He never had to. The space around us changed anyway. Everyone suddenly remembering he was captain and I was not. Heat crawled up my neck, which was unfair, because I was still freezing. Mason, I said under my breath, don't make it a thing. His gaze stayed on me, then stopped making me repeat myself. I let go. Should have annoyed me. It did annoy me a little, but under that was something soft and embarrassing that spread through my chest, because being noticed by Mason Reed felt too much like being chosen, and I knew better than to confuse the two. The motel lobby smelled like old coffee, wet carpet, and lemon cleaner losing a battle it had been fighting for years. We crowded in with our bags and damp jackets, leaving dark puddles across the tile. The clerk behind the desk looked like he'd seen worse than a college soccer team at midnight, but not by much. Coach handled the rooms while the rest of us hovered near a rack of postcards no one wanted. I found my duffel at my feet, because Mason had carried it in without saying anything. He set it beside me and immediately turned away, like that made it casual. You didn't have to do that. I know. Then why did you? He glanced down at my wet sleeve. Because you weren't going to. I had no answer for that, so I pretended to search my bag for my phone. The screen was dead. Of course it was. My charger was tangled with athletic tape and a granola bar crushed flat enough to qualify as dust. When I looked up, Mason was still there. Not looking at me exactly, but not leaving either. Around us, room keys began changing hands. 2 guys per room, then 3 when the clerk started apologizing. Tyler tried to negotiate for a room far from the coaches. The storm rattled the glass doors hard enough that everyone turned toward it at once. Outside, the parking lot had become a black mirror, broken by rain. Coach counted heads again, frowning. We're short. The clerk lifted both hands. I told you, I've got what I've got. There's 1 single left. A few guys started talking at once. Someone said they could sleep in the lobby. Someone else said he wasn't sleeping on that carpet unless his scholarship depended on it. I felt the old instinct rise before I could stop it. Clean and familiar. Make it easy. Take less. Be the person no one has to solve for. I can take the chair, I said. Or the floor. It's fine. Mason turned his head slowly. I hated that he'd heard me. I hated more that part of me had wanted him to. Coach looked relieved for half a second, which hurt in a small, practiced way. Vale, you sure? Yeah, I said. No big deal. Mason reached across the counter before Coach could take the last key. His fingers closed around the plastic tag. He's with me tonight. The lobby went quieter than it should have. Not silent, just shifted. A few heads turned. Tyler's eyebrows climbed. Coach blinked at Mason like he was recalculating the simplest math in the world. I stared at the key in Mason's hand. Mason. He looked at me. Rain-dark hair falling slightly over his forehead. Expression unreadable except for the stubborn set of his jaw. You're not sleeping on the floor, he said. I followed Mason across the motel walkway with rain cutting under the roof and blowing cold against my face. The key swung from his fingers, bright plastic tapping his knuckles. Neither of us said anything, which somehow made every step louder. The rest of the team disappeared into different rooms, dragging bags, complaining about the storm, laughing too hard at nothing, the way people do when they're tired and losing feels better with noise around it. Mason didn't look back. He walked like he knew exactly where he was going. Even though the room numbers were half hidden behind peeling paint and the rain had soaked through the shoulders of his jacket. Our room was at the end of the second-floor walkway, right beside a vending machine that hummed like it was trying not to die. Mason shoved the key into the lock once, twice, then pushed the door open with his shoulder. Warm, stale air rolled out. I stepped inside after him and stopped so fast he nearly ran into me. There was one bed, one queen bed with a faded blue comforter, 2 flat pillows, and a lamp on each side, like the room was trying to pretend it had options. I looked at the chair in the corner. Small, wooden, angled under a tiny round table with coffee rings burned into the surface. "That's mine," I said. Mason dropped his bag near the dresser. "No, it's a chair. I've slept in worse places. Congratulations. I'm serious." "So am I." He turned, water dripping from the ends of his hair onto his collar. "You're not sleeping sitting up after playing 40 minutes in freezing rain." 42 minutes, I corrected, before I could stop myself. His expression changed, not much, just a flicker. You counted change." "I was there." "I know you were there," he said, too quickly, like the words had been waiting behind his teeth. Then he looked away and unzipped his bag. "Take the bathroom first. Hot water might still exist if we're lucky." I wanted to argue because arguing felt safer than obeying. Instead, I grabbed dry sweatpants and a t-shirt from my duffel and escaped into the bathroom. The mirror was fogged at the edges even before I turned on the shower. I looked awful. Pale, mouth tight, wet hair sticking to my forehead, a thin red scrape along my cheek from the second half. Reliable Ethan Vale, professional extra body, standing in a motel bathroom with his captain on the other side of the door and one bed waiting like a dare. The shower was barely warm, but it helped. I changed slowly, buying time, then realized there was no towel except one that looked decorative and one that looked like it had been folded by someone angry. When I came out, Mason was sitting on the edge of the bed in a dry shirt, elbows on his knees, scrolling through his phone. He looked up immediately, his gaze moving over me once. Not in a way I could accuse him of, but not careless either. "Still cold?" he asked. "No, you're lying. You ask questions you already know the answer to, only when you keep answering them wrong." He stood and pulled something from his bag. A gray team hoodie, soft from too many washes, the university crest cracked across the front. He tossed it at me before I could prepare myself. "Put that on." I caught it against my chest. It was heavier than mine, warmer, and it smelled like rain, grass, and the clean detergent the athletic department used. Underneath that was something else I didn't want to name because it belonged to Mason, and I'd spent a year not letting myself want things that belonged to Mason. "I have a sweatshirt," I said. "Your sweatshirt is wet. It'll dry." He paused. "Ethan." There it was again. My name in his voice, low and certain, making refusal feel childish. I pulled the hoodie over my head. It swallowed my hands and fell loose at my hips. Mason watched for 1 second too long, then bent to untie his shoes. "Don't make it weird," he muttered. "You're freezing." I wasn't making it weird. "You were about to." I was about to say thank you. That got me a glance. "Were you?" "No," I admitted. His mouth curved. Not the public smile he gave coaches and girls by the fence, but smaller, tired, real enough that it made me look away first. Mason took the fastest shower in human history, or maybe I just spent the whole time standing by the window, pretending not to listen to water through thin walls. Outside, rain blurred the parking lot until the bus looked like a shadow. I checked my dead phone again because I needed something to do with my hands. When Mason came out, his hair was towel rough and his shirt clung slightly at the shoulders. He looked at the bed, then at me, then at the chair, as if he already knew exactly what argument I was preparing. "Left side or right?" he asked. "Chair." "Wrong answer." "Mason." "Ethan, you can't captain me into a bed." "I'm not captaining you." He pulled the comforter back and sat on the right side. "I'm being practical." Practical would be me taking the floor. Practical would be both of us sleeping so we don't look like ghosts tomorrow. The storm cracked hard enough to make the lights flicker. For a second the room flashed white, and I saw his face without its usual armor. He looked tired, not just from the game, from holding something up all the time. I wondered what it cost him to be Mason Reed. Captain, scholarship athlete, everyone's sure thing. Then I hated myself for wondering, because caring about him in detail was how I got into trouble. I climbed into the left side of the bed with enough caution for surgery. There was a whole strip of mattress between us, but it felt smaller once the lamp went off. The room changed in the dark. Rain became louder. Mason's breathing became something I had to pretend not to hear. The hoodie bunched under my chin, warm around my neck. I kept my hands locked together over my stomach, like that would prove I had no dangerous thoughts. After a few minutes, Mason said, "You always do that." "Do what?" "Offer to take the worst option." I stared at the ceiling. I could barely see it. "Somebody has to." "No. Somebody usually lets you." That landed too close. I tried to laugh it off, but it came out thin. "It's not that deep." "You say that too. Are you keeping a list?" "Maybe." The answer should have been a joke. It didn't sound like one. I turned my head before I could think better of it. Mason was facing the ceiling too, jaw shadowed in the dark, one arm folded behind his head. He looked miles away and too close at the same time. "I don't mind," I said. "Yes, you do." I swallowed. "You don't know that. I know you stayed after practice last week icing Marco's ankle when yours was swollen. He needed it more. You limped to class the next morning." I went still. I hadn't known he'd seen that. Mason's voice softened, almost rough. "I notice more than you think." The rain filled the silence after that. I wanted to ask what else he noticed. If he noticed every time I looked away too fast. If he noticed how I stopped laughing when the guys talked about girls and weekend parties and all the normal things that made me feel like a visitor in my own life. If he noticed that being beside him hurt most when he was kind. Instead I said, "That's a dangerous habit for a straight captain." The words slipped out too sharp, too honest at the edges. My whole body went cold under the hoodie. Mason didn't move for a long second. Then he said, "Maybe I'm tired of being only what people call me." Before I could answer, thunder slammed over the motel so hard the window shook. I flinched, not much, but enough. Mason's hand moved in the dark and closed gently around my wrist. It was instinctive. Warm fingers, loose grip, thumb resting near my pulse. Neither of us spoke. He didn't pull away. I didn't ask him to. The space between us stayed there, but it stopped feeling empty. I told myself he was half asleep. I told myself captains checked on teammates. I told myself the storm made people strange. But Mason's thumb moved once against my skin, careful and quiet, and every excuse I'd built all year seemed to lose its shape in the dark, sometime before morning. I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew, the rain had softened to a steady whisper, and gray light was leaking through the curtains. My body was warm, too warm. Mason was turned toward me, one hand still loosely around my wrist. His face relaxed in sleep in a way I'd never seen on the field. For one impossible minute, I didn't move. I just lay there in his hoodie, close enough to count the faint bruise along his jaw, knowing something had changed even if neither of us was brave enough to name it yet. I pulled my wrist away before Mason woke, but not fast enough to make it feel like nothing. His fingers slid from my skin to the sheet, slow and warm, and I sat up with the careful panic of someone leaving a room after stealing something. The motel air had gone cool overnight. Pale light pushed through the curtains in thin gray lines. The only sound was rain dripping from the gutter outside and Mason breathing beside me, quiet and even. His face turned toward the pillow where my shoulder had been. I should have felt relieved that he was asleep. Instead, I missed his hand with an ache so immediate it embarrassed me. I climbed out of bed and found my jeans folded over the chair where I'd left them. Still damp, stiff at the knees. I stared at them like they'd personally betrayed me. Mason's hoodie hung loose on my body, warm from sleep now, carrying both of us in the fabric. That was worse. I stood there with my back to the bed, trying to decide whether taking it off would make me look guilty, or wearing it would make me look hopeful. "You're thinking too loud," Mason said. I turned. He was awake, one arm bent under his head, eyes half open and softer than they had any right to be. His hair was a mess. Without the captain's band, without the field, without a dozen teammates waiting for him to lead, he looked almost ordinary. Almost. Then his gaze dropped to the hoodie, and something unreadable passed over his face. Sorry, I said. I was trying to be quiet. You were standing there like the chair asked you a hard question. The chair and I have history. His mouth twitched for 1 second. We were almost normal. Then his eyes moved to the empty space between us on the bed, and the room remembered the night for both of us. My wrist tingled where his hand had been. I tucked it into the hoodie pocket. Mason sat up and rubbed both hands over his face. Roads should be clear soon. Coach texted. My phone died. I know. You tried checking it 6 times last night. Dead every time. You counted. His answer came too quickly. Hard not to notice when you kept sighing like a Victorian widow. I laughed before I could stop myself, and the sound loosened something tight in the room. Mason looked pleased, then seemed to catch himself. He stood, grabbed his bag, and turned toward the bathroom. You can keep wearing it, he said, not looking at me. The hoodie? No, the motel curtains. I rolled my eyes even though he couldn't see it. I was going to give it back. Still cold. That excuse expires eventually. Then I'll make up another one. The bathroom door closed before I could answer. I stood there with my hand in the pocket of his hoodie, thumb brushing a loose thread inside the seam, and tried very hard not to smile. Breakfast was stale bagels, bruised bananas, and motel coffee strong enough to strip paint. The team gathered in the lobby in clumps, hair wet, eyes heavy, moods improved by the simple fact that we weren't on the bus yet. I kept to the side near the window, watching the storm lose its temper over the parking lot. Mason came down a few minutes after me, duffel over one shoulder, captain face already back on. Controlled, awake, untouchable. He looked at me first. Not long, not obviously, but first. I hated that I noticed. Tyler appeared beside me, smelling like mint gum and sleep. He held 2 paper cups of coffee, one in each hand, and nodded at the hoodie. That reads. I looked down as if the gray fabric had become a public announcement. Mine got soaked. Looks better on you than him. The words were harmless, friendly. Tyler was like that with everyone. Easy and warm, never careful enough to know when he'd stepped near something fragile. I opened my mouth to make some dry comment, but Mason's voice cut in from behind us. Bus is loading in 5. Tyler turned with a grin. Morning to you too, Captain Sunshine. Mason's expression didn't move. Don't leave your bag this time. I didn't leave it. I placed it strategically. You left it in the vending machine alcove. Tyler laughed, then held one coffee toward me. Here. I grabbed an extra. Figured you looked like you needed it. I took it because refusing would have been strange. Thanks. Mason's gaze dropped to the cup in my hand. It was fast, almost nothing, but his jaw tightened. I'd seen that look on the field when an opponent cut too close to a forward Mason was protecting. It didn't belong in a motel lobby over bad coffee. Tyler, completely unaware he'd wandered into weather more dangerous than the storm, leaned closer and said, Seriously, though, the hoodie works. Very tragic college athlete. Big fan. Heat climbed my neck. Please never say that again. No promises. Mason stepped between us without technically stepping between us. Coach needs everyone outside. He sent you personally? Tyler asked. I'm telling everyone you were telling Vale pretty intensely. For one terrifying second. I thought Mason would answer honestly. Instead, he looked at Tyler with captain-level patience and said, Because Vale listens. The words were practical team words, nothing anyone could question, but they landed in me wrong. Like being praised for obedience when I wanted to be wanted for something messier. On the bus, Mason saved me the seat beside him. He did it casually, one bag dropped on the aisle seat until I climbed the steps, then moved without looking up from his phone. No announcement, no explanation. I hesitated because half the team was still boarding behind me and choosing that seat felt different after the motel room. Before, I could have pretended it was habit. Now the space beside Mason looked like a question. You sitting? He asked. I slid in. You're bossy before caffeine. I had motel coffee. I'm legally awake. That wasn't coffee. That was a threat. He gave that small, private smile again. Gone almost as soon as it arrived. The bus pulled out of the parking lot, tires hissing over wet pavement. Outside, the world looked washed thin, Flooded ditches, dark trees, low clouds pressed against the morning. I held Tyler's coffee in both hands, but I could feel Mason's hoodie against my wrists, his shoulder a careful inch from mine, his silence full of things he wouldn't say. Back on campus, life tried to return to normal, which only made everything stranger. We unloaded bags. Coach reminded us about recovery practice. The guys scattered toward dorms and dining halls. Mason stood near the bus talking to the assistant coach, captain again. He didn't look at me while I carried a crate toward the equipment room. Not once. I told myself that was good. I told myself whatever had happened in the dark belonged to bad weather and exhaustion, and daylight had corrected it. Then, during recovery practice 2 days later, Mason noticed my ankle before I even limped. "Sit out the sprint set," he said, appearing beside me while I tightened my laces on the bench. I looked up. "It's fine." His eyebrows lifted. I sighed. "I hate that you've learned my lines. I hate that you keep using them. It's a little sore, that's all." Mason crouched in front of me, close enough that the conversation slipped under the noise of the field. His hands didn't touch my ankle, but his attention did. He looked at the swelling, the tape, the way I kept my heel light against the grass. "You should have told Coach, so he could bench me." Mason's face changed. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make yourself smaller before anyone else can." I had no defense against that. Not there. Not with sunlight on the field and whistles blowing and Mason looking at me like he'd brought the motel room into the afternoon. Before I could answer, someone called his name. Mason stood, but his voice stayed low. "No sprints." "You ordering me?" "Yes." Captain voice. "Whatever works." He walked away before I could decide whether to be irritated or touched. I chose irritated because it was less dangerous. That week, the hoodie became a problem. Mason never asked for it back. I never offered again. At first I wore it because my own sweatshirt was still damp from the trip. Then because it was clean. Then because it was raining. Then because reasons were easy to invent when you wanted them badly enough. I wore it in my dorm while studying, sleeves pulled over my knuckles. I wore it to the dining hall once and pretended not to notice when Mason saw me from across the room and forgot what he was saying to Marco. At night, when my roommate was out and the room was quiet, I caught myself pressing the collar near my mouth while reading. The detergent smell had faded but not completely. I dropped it like it had burned me, then picked it up again 5 minutes later, because apparently I had no pride left where Mason Reed was concerned. The worst part was that Mason kept giving me just enough to hope on. A coffee set beside my bag before morning lift, a seat saved at team review. His hand brushing my back once as he moved past me in the locker room, light and quick, followed by his immediate retreat into a conversation about Saturday's match. Warm in fragments, careful in public, close enough to confuse me, never close enough to claim. By Friday, I was tired of being confused. Practice ended under a sky the color of wet concrete. I stayed near the sideline, unwinding tape from my ankle while the others drifted toward the locker room. Tyler dropped onto the bench beside me, stretching his legs out with a dramatic groan. "You doing anything after this?" he asked. I glanced at him. "Laundry, probably. Very glamorous." "Skip it. Grab coffee with me." I blinked. "Coffee? That thing people drink while pretending not to call it a date." The tape caught on my fingers. Tyler's smile softened. Less joking now, more careful. He wasn't pushing. He was offering openly, easily. Like wanting my time wasn't something that needed to be hidden in bad weather or explained away as captain responsibility. I was still searching for an answer when the air shifted behind me. Mason's shadow fell across the bench. "He already has plans," Mason said. For a second, nobody moved. Tyler stayed seated beside me with his elbows on his knees, still waiting for the answer I hadn't given. Mason stood behind the bench like he had every right to speak for me. Rain-dark practice shirt clinging at his shoulders, captain's whistle hanging from 2 fingers. The field lights had just started to come on, turning the wet grass silver around us. The rest of the team drifted toward the locker room, loud enough to make this feel private and not private at all. I looked up at Mason. "Do I?" His eyes dropped to mine, and something tightened in his face. He'd expected me to play along. That was the worst part. Mason knew the shape of me too well. The easy joke, the quiet exit, the way I made other people comfortable even when my own chest was folding in on itself. Tyler glanced between us. I'm not trying to steal him from team dinner or anything. We don't have team dinner, I said. Mason's jaw worked once. We need to go over film. Coach said tomorrow. He moved it. No, he didn't. I stood slowly, tape still balled in one hand. My ankle gave a small warning pulse, but I ignored it. You're lying badly for someone who spends half his life giving post-game interviews. Tyler let out a soft laugh, then stopped when neither of us joined him. He stood too, more careful now. I'll catch you later, Ethan. He said my name gently, without claiming it, then walked away toward the locker room, leaving Mason and me beside the bench with the rain starting again in thin, cold needles. Mason watched him go. He's not serious. I stared at him. About coffee? About you. The words hit sharp enough that I almost stepped back. You don't get to say that. His attention snapped to me. I mean, he flirts with everybody. So you don't have to fall for the first guy who gives you attention. I laughed once. Not because it was funny, but because if I didn't make a sound I might say something worse. That's rich, coming from you. Mason looked confused, and that made me angrier than if he'd looked guilty. I grabbed my bag from the bench. The hoodie was inside it because I'd taken it off before practice, folded badly on top of my textbooks like I could hide a feeling by zipping it away. Ethan, he said, following when I started toward the equipment shed instead of the locker room. No, Captain voice. I wasn't. You were. You always are when you want me to stop asking questions. He caught up beside me near the sideline. The rain was light, but the air smelled like wet dirt and cut grass, the kind of smell that usually calmed me after practice. Tonight, it only made everything feel too clear. The field was emptying behind us. The world narrowed to Mason's footsteps matching mine. I didn't like how he was talking to you, Mason said. That sounds like a you problem. It is when he's messing with your head. I stopped so abruptly he took another step before turning back. My head was fine until you decided I wasn't allowed to answer for myself. His face hardened, then softened, then hardened again. I watched him fight 3 different versions of himself and choose the safest one. I'm looking out for you, he said. There it was, the neat little box he kept trying to put this in. Captain responsibility, team concern, practical kindness. The same box where motel rooms and wrist touches and saved coffees apparently went to die. I nodded slowly. Right. Mason stepped closer. Don't say it like that. Like what? Like I hurt you. The laugh that came out of me was quieter this time. You don't get to decide what hurts. His mouth parted, but no words came. For once, Mason Reed didn't have the field organized in front of him. No formation, no command, no easy pass. I walked into the equipment shed because I needed my hands busy before they started shaking. The overhead bulb flickered when I pulled the chain. Shelves of cones, tape, spare balls, and folded pennies crowded the small space. This was familiar territory. This was where I knew what to do. I could stack, sort, count, fix. I could be useful until I disappeared. Mason stood in the doorway, blocking the rain. You don't have to do that right now, he said. I know. Then why are you? Because it's easier than looking at you. Silence. The kind that came alive between us. I picked up a pile of orange cones and lined them by size, even though they were already lined by size. Mason came in slowly, ducking under the low door frame. The room shrank around him. He was too close, all wet hair and controlled breathing. I hated that part of me still wanted to turn into him. Tell me what I did, he said. You really don't know? I know I'm screwing this up. That stopped me. His voice had lost its edge. He sounded younger suddenly. Not like the captain everyone leaned on, but like a 22-year-old standing in a shed during the rain with no idea how to hold what he wanted. I looked at him. You act like I matter when nobody can see it. Then the second somebody might notice, I'm your teammate again. Your responsibility. The guy you're looking out for. Mason swallowed. You are my teammate. I know. That's the problem. It's the only word you'll use. He looked away, jaw tight, eyes fixed on a shelf of spare shin guards like they might give him an answer. You think this is easy for me? No, I said. I think you want it to be easy enough that it doesn't cost you anything. His eyes came back to mine. I should have stopped. I knew I should have stopped, but there was a kind of relief in finally bleeding where he could see it. You don't have to want me, Mason. You don't owe me that. But you can't keep acting jealous when someone else does. You can't touch my wrist in the dark and then call it nothing in daylight. His face went pale in a way I'd never seen, even after bad losses. I never called it nothing. You never called it anything. Rain ticked against the shed roof. A whistle blew somewhere far across campus, thin and distant. Mason took one step closer. That night meant something. My heart betrayed me so fast I almost hated it. Then say what? He looked at me, really looked. The space between us was barely a breath now. If he reached out, his fingers would touch the sleeve of my practice shirt. If I leaned forward, my forehead might find his shoulder. Every almost from the last week gathered in that tiny equipment shed. The hoodie, the bed, the coffee, the hand at my back. His voice saying my name like he'd forgotten everyone else knew it too. Mason lifted his hand, then stopped halfway. Ethan, The door outside banged in the wind. Voices passed near the shed. Two teammates laughing as they crossed toward the locker room. Mason's hand dropped, and there he was again, careful, afraid, gone before he'd even moved. I felt the last bit of hope inside me fold itself neatly and step back. Mason closed his eyes for half a second. I was just looking out for you. The sentence was so small, so reasonable, so perfectly built to hurt me without sounding cruel. I nodded once. Yeah. No, wait. That's not. It's okay. I moved past him to my bag. I get it now. You don't. I do. My fingers found the gray hoodie before I let myself think about it. Soft fabric, worn cuffs, cracked university crest. I pulled it out and held it between us. I think I've had this longer than I should have. Mason stared at it like I'd placed something breakable in his hands. Ethan. I pushed the hoodie against his chest. He took it because instinct made him catch things thrown his way, even when they weren't thrown. His fingers closed around the fabric. You should have it back, I said. His voice dropped. I don't want it back. Then you should have been more careful giving it to me. That landed. I saw it in his face, the flinch he tried to hide and failed to hide for a second. I wanted to take the words back. I wanted to make it easier for him. I wanted to smile, say I was tired, say the rain had made everything dramatic. But I'd spent too long translating crumbs into meals. I'd spent too long being grateful for almost. So I held his gaze, even though my whole body wanted to look away. You don't get to keep me warm in private and act cold when someone else is watching. Then I walked out into the rain before he could answer, because if Mason Reed finally found the courage to say my name again, I wasn't sure I'd have the strength to keep walking away. The rain stopped before morning, but the cold stayed. It sat in my room while I changed for practice the next day. It followed me across campus under a pale sky, my hands shoved into my jacket pockets because they didn't know what to do without Mason's hoodie covering them. That was the stupidest part. Not the almost confession. Not the way his hand had lifted toward me and dropped when voices passed outside the shed. My body missed a piece of clothing like it had been shelter, like I'd given back warmth itself and not just gray cotton. At practice, Mason was perfect, which made everything worse. He called warm-ups, corrected formations, spoke to coach, pulled a freshman aside to explain spacing. Nobody looking at him would have known anything was wrong. That was Mason's gift. He could bleed internally and still organize a midfield. I stopped staying late. At first nobody noticed. When the cones were still out, someone else picked them up. When the cooler needed carrying, Marco grabbed one handle and complained loudly enough for 3 people. When Tyler asked if I needed help with tape, I said no and meant it. I went to class. I ate dinner. I iced my ankle in my room with my phone face down beside me. Mason texted once. You okay? I looked at it until the screen dimmed, then turned the phone over without answering. The next 2 days had a strange shape. Mason and I moved around each other like players avoiding the same patch of wet grass. He still noticed things. When I stretched too long on my bad ankle, his head turned. When Tyler sat beside me before film review, Mason's eyes found us from across the room, then moved away before anyone could follow them. He didn't interrupt this time. He didn't claim plans I hadn't made. He just sat there with his jaw tight and both hands folded, like discipline could save him from wanting. Tyler was kind about it, which somehow made everything harder. He bought me coffee after Thursday practice and didn't call it a date when I stayed quiet. "You don't have to explain anything," he said. I watched a drop of coffee slide down the cup. That obvious? Only to people with eyes. He bumped his shoulder lightly against mine. "For what it's worth, I think he's more scared than careless. That doesn't make it hurt less." "No," Tyler said. "It just means he has a choice." I looked across the quad where the field lights glowed beyond the trees. "So do I?" Saturday's match was at home. The bleachers were full, the grass freshly lined, the student section loud enough to rattle the nerves out of anyone. Coach started me on the bench as usual, and I told myself not to mind. Then, in the second half, Marco took a hard hit and coach called my name. For 40 minutes, I forgot everything except the field. The ball didn't care who wanted whom. Grass didn't ask for confessions. You moved. You passed. You saw space before it opened. Mason found me twice with clean, impossible passes that said more than either of us had managed all week. The second came late, a hard diagonal through traffic. I trapped it badly, recovered worse, and somehow sent the ball across the box where Tyler finished it into the corner. The stadium erupted. Tyler grabbed me first, laughing into my shoulder. Marco nearly knocked us both over. Hands hit my back, my hair, my arms. For once, I wasn't just useful in the quiet places. I was in the middle of the noise. Mason stood still. Then he smiled. Not his captain's smile, not the one for cameras or coach. The small one, the dangerous one, the one I'd last seen in a motel room before sunrise. We won by one. After the handshake line, after coach's speech, after the team started drifting toward the locker room, I didn't follow. I climbed into the emptying bleachers and sat 3 rows up, where the metal still held the day's cold. The field looked smaller from there, almost peaceful. I should have felt happy. I did partly, but happiness didn't erase the ache. It only made me understand what I wanted more clearly. I didn't want to be the guy Mason looked at only when the storm was loud enough to cover it. I didn't want to be a secret wrapped in borrowed cotton. I wanted warmth that survived daylight. Footsteps sounded on the bleachers. I knew they were his before I looked. Mason climbed slowly, still in his warm-up jacket, hair damp from the game, gray hoodie folded over one arm. My breath caught at the sight of it, but I stayed seated. Below us, several teammates were still near the sideline. Tyler looked up once, saw Mason, then looked away with deliberate kindness. Mason stopped in front of me. For once he didn't check who was watching. "You left before the locker room," he said. "You found me. I keep doing that." "Yeah," I said. "You do." He looked down at the hoodie. "I've been carrying this around like an idiot." My mouth almost smiled. "That sounds inconvenient." It was. His eyes lifted to mine. "Not as inconvenient as realizing you were right." Mason sat beside me, leaving a careful space. Then he unfolded the hoodie and placed it around my shoulders. Not tossed, not hidden, not rushed. The fabric settled warm against my back. His hands stayed there for a second before he let go. I looked toward the field because looking at him felt too dangerous. "People can see us." "I know. You sure you want that?" "No," he said. "That hurts to say. I'm scared of it. But I want you more than I want to keep pretending I'm not." My hands closed around the edge of the hoodie. Mason's voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. The storm didn't change what I felt. It just put me in a room where I couldn't outrun it. I've been calling it responsibility because that was easier than admitting I was jealous and scared, and stupid enough to think that not naming it would keep me from losing anything. I swallowed hard. "You did lose something. I know." He looked at me then, full and unguarded. "I lost the right to ask you to wait quietly while I figured myself out." "Mason, I can't be someone you only want when nobody's watching," I said. "I know. I mean it. I can't do almost anymore. I don't want almost." He breathed out a little rough. "I want to sit next to you after games without making it look accidental. I want to buy you coffee and not pretend I grabbed an extra. I want you wearing my hoodie because I gave it to you, not because the weather gave me an excuse. And I want to stop using teammate like it's a wall, when it's supposed to mean you're already on my side. My throat tightened so badly that answering took effort. That was almost good. He laughed once, soft and shaky. Almost. You're still learning. Yeah. I am. A group of freshmen passed below, loud and oblivious. One of them looked up, saw us sitting close, saw the hoodie around my shoulders. Mason didn't move away. He didn't drop his gaze. He stayed. That simple act broke something open in me more thoroughly than any speech could have. Mason turned his hand, palm up, on the bench between us. An offer, not a claim. I looked at it for a long second. Then I put my hand in his. His fingers closed carefully. Like he understood he was holding something I'd fought hard to protect. I need time, I said. I'll give you time and honesty. I'll give you that first, and if I panic, I'll tell you I'm panicking instead of acting like an idiot. I looked down at our hands, at the gray sleeves covering my wrists again. Mason's thumb moved once over my knuckles. The same careful motion from the motel room. Only now there was no thunder to blame and no darkness to hide inside. After a while he said, I don't want it back. The hoodie. Any of it. His voice softened. You don't have to give back every good thing someone gives you, Ethan. You don't have to earn your place beside me by being useful. You're not here because you make things easier. You're here because I chose you. I closed my eyes, and for once the silence inside me didn't feel empty. When we finally stood, the field was almost clear. Mason kept holding my hand down the bleachers. Not high, not dramatic, just there. At the bottom, Tyler saw us and grinned into his coffee like he'd won a private bet. Marco shouted something about captains getting sentimental after victories, and Mason flipped him off without letting go of me. I laughed then, surprised by how light it felt. We walked toward the locker room under the stadium lights, shoulder to shoulder, his hoodie warm around me, his hands steady in mine. Nothing was magically simple. Mason still had people to tell, and I still had old habits that would make me flinch before I trusted softness. But he didn't let go when the others saw us. He didn't turn me into a secret. When daylight returned, for the first time in my life, I stopped feeling grateful just to be kept around, because Mason looked at me like I was someone worth choosing. And that's where we leave Ethan and Mason for now. Two people who finally stopped hiding in the dark and chose each other in the light. If the story made your heart ache a little, in the best way, that's exactly what we love creating for you. These aren't just stories. They're the moments we wish we could live by ourselves. The slow burn, the almosts, the person who finally stops being careful and just chooses you. If you're new here, welcome. This is where we bring you stories like this every single week. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. And speaking of what's next, this isn't the end for Ethan and Mason, because choosing each other in the bleachers, that was just the beginning. There's a locker room full of teammates who still don't know. There's a coach who's about to find out his captain is falling for the guy everyone overlooked. And there's a rival team's captain who's about to make it very clear. He wants Ethan too. Part 2 is coming, and it's going to hit even harder. So drop a comment and tell me. Should Mason tell the team himself? Or should Ethan get to decide when the world finds out? I read every single one, and I might just let you decide where this story goes next. Like this video if you want more. Subscribe if you want to be here when it drops. And I'll see you very soon. Blue Heart.
आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का मुस्कुरा के बात करती हो आदतें खराब करती हो, ना दिखो बेताब लगता हूँ, आशिक बेहिसाब लगता हूँ। ऐसा नशा है तेरे दीदार का, आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का, लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का। जिंदगी हसीन लगती है जब ये जालिम प्यार होता है, सांसों में सांस आती है जब तेरा दीदार होता है। नखरा है ऐसा मेरी सरकार का, आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का, लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का। नखरा इसका टॉप पर, आती है टिकटॉक पर, नैनो से है नैन मिलाती, लड़कों के है दिल जलाती, पिंडी में है चर्चा इसका, नीरा जितना खर्चा इसका। मैंने बोला इसको मेट्रो में बिठाऊंगा, कैपिटल ले जाऊंगा, F7 भी घुमाऊंगा, मोनाल भी दिखाऊंगा, सेंटोरस भी ले जाऊंगा। आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का, लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का। मौसमों की बेकरारी को आजमा के जान जाओगी, हिज्र की आजमाइश में एक दिन पहचान जाओगी। कहना है मेरे दिल बेकरार का, आशिक हूँ तेरा राजा बाजार का, लगता है मुझको नशा ये प्यार का।